Good morning, everyone. That's right. Just like a classroom. How is a Board of Regents meeting like a classroom? Good morning, everyone. I'll call to order the meeting of the University of Wisconsin System Board of Regents and ask the Secretary to please read the roll. Here. 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 Thank you very much. It was a year ago when we approved the action steps following our strategic planning effort to keep momentum behind the growth agenda for Wisconsin. And if you recall, a number of regents mentioned during our discussion that one of the most important things is that we monitor the progress, that we decide on these action steps, but then we also assess our progress. And we have gotten periodic reports from Vice President Martin on the action steps, and today we're going to have a more full discussion on where we are celebrating the one-year anniversary of implementing our strategic plan. So to begin that discussion, I'd like to call upon President Riley.
Thank you, President Bradley. Good morning, everybody. Good to see you all. As Mark said, it's amazing to me, but it has been a year since we announced the growth agenda action steps. We had 10 when we first announced them, and then we added another one, so we now have 11. And I think we've made real progress. You've had the chance to see and read some of that progress in the board materials with the sheet on each of the 11 action steps. And in a minute, I'm going to turn the podium over to Senior Vice President Martin to talk in some detail about each of them. Let me say a few words, though, in an introduction about a couple of examples of the kinds of progress we've made. This past December, if you'll recall, this board endorsed the shared learning outcomes, shared learning goals, as part of our commitment to preparing all of our students who earn a baccalaureate degree anywhere in the UW system to be great contributors, competent citizens in a 21st century knowledge-based global economy. This is a succinct statement, these learning goals, of what anybody who earns a baccalaureate degree should know and be able to do coming out of any of our campuses. These priorities include things like critical thinking and creative thinking, effective communication skills, written and oral, knowledge of human culture, knowledge of the natural world. I just wanted you to know that I had a chance recently to talk to the Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce Board of Directors, and one of the things I highlighted were these shared learning goals, and indeed they were very well received by that group, and I got a couple emails afterwards talking about how important they thought it was that our faculty had done this. And let me emphasize, and I know Rebecca will, this was a task for the faculty. They got together faculty from around the system and did this for the first time ever. Great example of the progress. Another one that I'll highlight, the UW-Madison Connections program. You know that as you go around the state, I think, or in your home territories as regents, as I go around the state, one of the questions I hear most often is, why can't my son, daughter, niece, nephew, cousin get into UW-Madison? It's a selective institution these days. We now have a program that started with the UW colleges, and now all 13 of the UW colleges are involved in it. And also the three of the Wisconsin technical colleges, the College of the Menominee Nation. Green Bay has just joined the Madison Connections program this fall, and 4 other of our comprehensive institutions will be participating in it next fall. This is a program, you'll recall, where students who are accepted, qualified at Madison, but don't get in because of just the press of people who are even more qualified who get accepted and get into Madison can start at any of these other campuses and transfer seamlessly as juniors if they choose to into Madison, do their junior and senior year there, and earn a UW-Madison degree. So we have greatly expanded that program, and I hope the message is going out to people across the state that this program is in place, and there are a variety of new entry glide paths into UW-Madison for those who choose to do it. And again, I'd emphasize that when we started this program in a few places, what we found was something I think like about half the students who started at other places liked it there and stay there. They don't transfer to UW-Madison. So it's a win-win for everybody, I think. We've also made a real commitment to step up our efforts to connect academic research with the private sector to create new jobs and new industries in Wisconsin. One good example of that was the recent opening of the Platteville Nanotechnology Center for Collaborative Research and Development. This is a center that's physically on the Platteville campus, but is virtually a center that includes everybody in the system who's working on nanotechnology, and it's about small technology, but there are a lot of people working on it around the system, as I think you know. We'll have, gratefully, an opportunity to hear from Tom Still tomorrow morning, the president of the Wisconsin Technology Council, about the report on academic research and development that they just put out. It's a great story about how we have ramped that up, made great progress in getting more research money and doing more good things with it. But we have other things still that we need to do in that realm, and Rebecca Martin will mention how we'll push that along even further when she has her remarks. And then finally, on what became the 11th action step around privately raised need-based financial aid. Our institutions have stepped up there in their efforts to increase that pot of money while not slacking off at all and sending the message to both the state and the federal governments that there's a governmental obligation here to continue to fund need-based financial aid. And I think when we announced that 11th action step a number of months ago, we had no idea where we would be in the economy, obviously, as we sit here today, and the importance of that effort, I think, is only highlighted by the state of the state, national, and indeed international economy. And you might remember I said when we started to talk about this that I'd found that we gave out $6 million a year system-wide in need-based financial aid, and I hoped we could double that, and I know that got a lot of people nervous when I said that. Well, just let me tell you one thing that's happened. The Fund for Wisconsin Scholars, the mortgage gift from John and Tasha Mortgage, will in this coming academic year, so the 08-09 academic year, distribute more than $3 million in need-based financial aid to students all across the system. And that's just what it will distribute in the University of Wisconsin system. More will go to students in the tech colleges. So I said we give out 6, I want to get to 12. We're going to have more than 3 from the Fund for Wisconsin Scholars alone added, so we're up to 9 plus. We're going to get to 12 pretty quick, I think, given the efforts that all of our institutions are making in this area. There is, by the way, a news release in your packets. I think we have it now, hot off the press, which will show you how that Fund for Wisconsin Scholars money will be distributed, thanks, Mark, across all of our institutions. And that's a great story, and that's a message we need to keep sending to our families and students around the state as they think about whether they want to go to college, whether they can afford to go to college. So when we talk about these 11 action steps, I want to emphasize that these are things that our faculty and staff from around the system have stepped forward and done, and we will continue to do it. But the action is really, we recognize that system administration is out there at the institutions with our faculty, staff, and students, because the students you'll hear tomorrow in the Know How to Go effort have been very, very active themselves on that one in particular. And as you know, beyond these 11 action steps, a big part of the strategic plan of the growth agenda are the initiatives that have come forward from all of our institutions that we're seeking funding for in the budget that you passed in August. So there are those campus-specific initiatives the 11 action steps we're talking about this morning are sort of the global system-wide ones that we're all working on together. And I think that just underscores the extent to which the growth agenda is a shared responsibility at all levels across the system. And I want to thank especially the faculty, staff, and students who stepped up to work with us, and the institutional leadership, the chancellors and vice chancellors, for working with us on this. I think Rebecca will have a great story to tell you now in her pretty comprehensive report on the action steps. So I'll turn it over to you, Rebecca.
Great. Here we go. There we go. Good morning. Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here today and to have enough time, to be given enough time to really give you the full picture of the work that we've been doing on the action steps. I know I've been able to talk about a little bit at each meeting, but I think when you look at the whole package together, I can tell you that I'm really pleased with the progress we made, and I hope that you will be too. So I thought that I would, at the risk of kind of going over ground you've been over many times, remind you that 3 years ago you endorsed President Riley's vision for the UW system, which was people's, jobs, communities. And this is not about growing the UW system. This is about advancing the vitality and the health of the state of Wisconsin. And I believe that now more than ever, we need to leverage the assets of the UW system to improve the outlook for our state as we look forward to what is a problematic time. A little bit about how we got here. The growth agenda is definitely more than just a set of UW system budget initiatives. It's a bold, long-term vision of where we want this state to be. We embarked almost 2 years ago on an Advantage Wisconsin planning process with the goal of trying to put concrete system-wide actions behind the vision of the growth agenda. Advantage Wisconsin was intended to provide a framework for the UW system, a strategic framework, one that would inform but not replace the strategic planning that's going on at all of our institutions. We wanted this to be a collaborative process, and we worked hard through think tanks with people from the campuses, from the communities, from so many of you were involved from across the system. We had statewide listening sessions where we took the ideas out and got feedback from many of our communities, and we had you involved at several stages. This slide should be familiar to you. This is the 7 core action strategies that we developed as part of Advantage Wisconsin, and you approved as our framework a year ago. And here are the growth agenda action steps. These came from the think tank groups on the core strategies. They also had a great deal of input and work from the chancellors and from the provosts. Over the past year, we've been able to move this agenda forward, although at different paces for different steps based on the complexity of the challenges and the resources we had available to make them happen. I'm going to provide you with an overview on each one of them, but I'll draw your attention, if you haven't had a chance to look at it already, to the detail that we provided on each one of these in your board materials today. The first action step is commit to shared learning goals for all UW baccalaureate undergraduates. And while Kevin just mentioned this, let me just remind you that this is such an important step for our system. I want to take a little bit of time to emphasize it again. This was based on the work of faculty from all of our institutions, as it really does sit with that responsibility of the faculty for our curriculum. It's based on the learning goals that are present at each one of our institutions. And we now have a clear commitment on how we will prepare our students to graduate with the competencies they need to be citizens in the 21st century, knowledge-based global society of the 21st century. I believe that this really represents the common of the UW system, what each of our institutions, with their distinct missions, identities, and cultures, and what we in the system have as a common. It's closely aligned with LEAP and the Wisconsin LEAP campaign, and any of you who have been able to look at that material will see that we put this in our own language, but it's very similar to LEAP. And as a result of this work and other efforts that we've made here, we are now one of 3 state systems participating in a national project funded by the Carnegie Corporation and sponsored by the American Association of Colleges and Universities called Give Students a Compass. which aims to remap general education programs in the context at the campus level, and also provides for sustained emphasis on equity and the success of underserved students in these programs. 3 of our campuses are taking the lead in the first stage of this process, of this grant program, and it will culminate in a statewide conference that we will be able to involve all of our campuses in, and it's very closely linked to the inclusive excellence work that we're doing on the diversity agenda, which I'll talk about in a minute. Create the student engagement portfolio is another one of the action steps that we started out with. This is linked to our commitment to student success, both in the classroom and in out of the classroom and co-learning and co-curricular experiences. We see these as an essential part of student development on all of our campuses and a really vital complement to curricular work. It's an integral part of the holistic education students receive, and we need to find a way both to recognize that and to provide students with a way to make it visible to, as they move forward in their lives, whether it be into the job environment or on to graduate school. The student engagement portfolio will help students clearly show the full extent of their learning experiences as they move forward in such areas as student leadership, undergraduate research, and service learning. There's some very strong models in institutions across the country for us to look at here, but this is not an inexpensive undertaking. It's one that will take additional resources if we're to implement it fully on our campuses. We currently have an e-portfolio or an electronic portfolio project running at UW-Milwaukee, UW-Stevens Point, UW-Whitewater, the UW colleges, and UW-Madison that we think may provide a cost-effective and flexible portfolio product that links to our current existing course management system that may help us to build the student engagement portfolio. We're looking forward to sharing these at a system-wide workshop next fall, and we're hoping to have funding to support 1 or 2 campus pilot projects in this arena as well. Here's one of the action steps that Kevin mentioned this morning: accelerate transformation of knowledge capacity into leading-edge jobs. This is an effort to connect academic research with the private sector to transform ideas into new jobs and new businesses that will attract and employ college-educated workers. As Kevin mentioned, Tom Still will be here tomorrow to talk about the recent work he's done on our academic R&D, which really, I think, reinforces the importance of the agenda that you helped us set here a year ago. We're approaching this complex challenge from several different angles. One is that we are working to enhance technology transfer at the comprehensive campuses, where there is a great deal of potential in the work of our faculty. This is work through WISIS, which I think you've heard about before, and working with our faculty and is trying to stimulate collaboration across campuses as well as free up research time on the individual campuses. We are in the process of putting together a research to jobs task force, and this, I think, will be part of the discussion tomorrow, to study and improve the pathway from research to patents to commercialization. We have a very strong history in this state through WARF and now through WISIS of that research to patent establishment, but we do not do as well as we think we should, or as we can see in other states of taking it from patent to commercialization, where we really have the impact that we're looking for on our economy. We also have new emerging technology centers at comprehensive universities. Kevin mentioned the Nanotechnology Center that just opened at Platteville. We have another center, the Tissue and Cellular Innovation Center, which will open at River Falls later this year. There's centers in the very early stages of development at several other comprehensive campuses. These all provide opportunities for key faculty at one of our institutions to take the lead but draw upon the expertise across our institutions to move this agenda forward. And then finally, with the support of the Kauffman Foundation, UW-Madison is collaborating with institutions across the state to offer an entrepreneurship summit in April to our faculty and staff, and this is focused on sharing best practices to try to stimulate and enhance the entrepreneurial spirit among our faculty and students. So not the outward piece to the community, but looking inward at our own programs, trying to look at ways we can teach entrepreneurism, promote faculty involvement in entrepreneurial efforts, and move the agenda forward in that way. Model inclusive excellence in our education and employment, obviously one of the core initiatives we are looking at now. For the third time in its 37-year history, the UW system finds itself at a critical juncture in the pursuit of the ideal of diversity. As you know, Plan 2008 has reached its end point, and we will be reporting to you on that in more detail in March. I'm sure it will be no surprise for you, having had a progress report on this a year ago, that our gains have been modest and inconsistent. And our challenge now is to try to build upon the work that we have done and to move diversity into the center of institutional strategic actions and core functions. The Equity Scorecard has been a primary means of advancing this work. Our first cohort of 5 students has completed the analysis of institutional barriers and identified potential points of intervention. Our second cohort of 5 began work on this summer. One of the surprising outcomes of the first set of Equity Scorecard findings was one that was pointed out to us by Estella Ben-Simone, who's working from the center at USC, who's been working closely with us, was that we were not making as great a use of the pathway from 2-year institutions transferring into our 4-year programs as we could be, and that this was an area where the participation of students of color was really lagging. And as a result of that, we have undertaken the Wisconsin Transfer Equity Study with funding from the Ford Foundation and sponsorship by the Center for Urban Education at USC, and this promises to help us enhance a critical pathway for our students of color. The climate study is complete now at 5 institutions, and you heard about that in detail at your October meeting. We are beginning work now on another 4 institutions. And finally, inclusive excellence is an approach that we've identified to help UW institutions establish a comprehensive, well-coordinated set of strategic actions that foster greater diversity, equity, and inclusion and accountability at every level of institutional life. We will have the opportunity to share all of this with you in more detail and have what we hope will be a full and spirited discussion of the policy issues associated with this agenda in March. New pathways to Wisconsin's underserved adult population. As you know, the state lags in the number of working adults with 4-year degrees. If we're going to reach our goal of more baccalaureate degree holders in this state, returning adult students have to be a part of that picture. We've been working with the Lumina Foundation on the Making Opportunity Affordable grant, which is a collaboration with all of our education partners in the state. We had a very well-attended MOA planning event last Friday, and some of you were there, and we really appreciated your participation. We were privileged to have Governor Doyle come and talk to the group about these important issues. Based on the initial work, we expect that the proposal for the next 4 years of funding from MOA will address policies to achieve easier student transition and therefore more graduates. It will focus on adults, persons of color, and veterans, and it will help us pursue assessing prior learning, creating a credit repository, and online programs. We have other good work underway on several campuses with funding from COBE, and these are detailed in your board material. The Wisconsin Know How to Go network is part of the larger Know How to Go Wisconsin project, which you've heard about before. This is our part of the national campaign to raise college aspirations in our young people and to teach them how to get there. Tomorrow you'll have a chance to see some of the work of some of the Wisconsin students who are engaged in this project. Our Know How to Go network is intended to engage our undergraduates as mentors to carry the message to young people and families statewide. We have existing programs already in our system that are exemplars for students mentoring young people. The UW Green Bay Future Phoenix program that the Education Committee is going to hear more about this afternoon. The UW Madison People program are just two. We have new programs underway at UW Marathon County and UW Eau Claire, both with support from internal and reallocated resources. This spring, we will showcase these models to encourage the development of similar programs at other campuses, and we hope to support several programs with reallocated funding next year. We're also working with the Great Lakes Higher Education Corporation on their federally funded Access Challenge grant, which is another piece of the Know How to Go campaign. Collaboration with the PK-12 community to enrich college preparation is a high priority for us. We need to find ways to increase the number of students who enter our universities prepared for success. We've been working with our higher education partners and the PK-12 community on this large and complex challenge, and we've agreed in that group to begin with a focus on mathematics preparation, a daunting task in and of itself. This is closely linked to our work on the American Diploma Project, which has also been with that whole sector, all of the sectors of educators in the state. And from that group, we've decided to appoint a task force of faculty members, math faculty members, from each of the 4 educational sectors who will work on a common set of math competencies that are needed to enter college-level math courses for college-level credit. We hope that the goal here is to better link those requirements with the curriculum that is being taught in our high schools, and as a result reduce the need for remedial coursework once our students arrive. We also have been working on an early math placement test. I think you may remember that we had new funding for this in the last biennium. This year we're piloting this test in 100 high schools across the state. This test will help students identify how well prepared they are to handle college-level math early enough so that they can take the courses they need in high school to get them where they need to be. And our goal is to implement this statewide next year. We're going to be holding a statewide conference probably in the fall to share best practices for teaching math in all education sectors, because we know we've got some great examples out there. We need to make others aware of them. We know we could have a lot to learn from some of the best high school teachers, math teachers in the state, and we think that if we work together we can try to infuse these good pedagogies across all of our educational system. We've reallocated funds to support local PK-16 math partnerships at the campus level next year and are looking for some exciting programs in that arena. I probably don't need to talk much more about the UW-Madison Connections program, except to mention that this is a dual admissions program rather than a transfer program. Students are actually admitted both to the institution where they're going to begin their coursework and UW-Madison through the Connections program. During their first 2 years, they receive all the support services available on their home campus, as well as being advised by a Madison counselor who will help make sure that the courses that they take will be able to transfer into Madison. We also know, as Kevin mentioned, that once students get a good start at one of our comprehensive institutions, they're going to have terrific experiences, make long-term relationships, and many of them will decide to stay. And so really, in the end, what we've done is create another way for us to keep the best and the brightest of Wisconsin students right here in our state, wherever they decide to graduate. Operational excellence and efficiency is another piece of this agenda. We need to keep our administrative costs in balance. They're already lowest in the nation, but that needs continuing focus and work if we are going to be able to focus our limited resources on the growth agenda. We have an operational excellence working group that has been developing initiatives to enhance existing efforts, infuse best practices across the system, and manage ever greater workloads without new resources. One of the initiatives that they have picked up and run with are called lean evaluation projects. which is using a data-driven process that seeks to streamline administrative activities and encourage more standardized business processes. They have completed the 3 projects, the evaluation projects that you see up there on the screen. These are multi-campus projects, and there are 3 more underway. Other initiatives include recognition of this work through a new award and sharing of best practices across the system as well as nationally. The new Wisconsin IDEA public policy forums are about to appear on your horizon. There's been a lot of work that's gone on in the last year to help us focus the many resources that the UW system has to contribute to the vexing social, environmental, and economic challenges facing our state. We are hoping to be able to bring objective, research-based information to this dialogue. We're looking at 2 forums a year focusing on issues that emerge from community-based dialogues. The target audience for these includes state lawmakers, community leaders, business people, faculty, staff, and students. These 3 campuses have been working together to identify, to put together this first 3 in what we hope will be an ongoing series of new Wisconsin IDEA policy forums for a long time. And we're looking forward to seeing you at UW Eau Claire on May 14th when we'll kick off this series. There also will be a participation available from across the state through 2-way video conferencing at several sites. So if you can't make it to Eau Claire, we still want you to participate. Finally, increased private need-based financial aid is a high priority that got added after we established these first 10 action steps. Kevin already mentioned the Fund for Wisconsin Scholars, but we wanted to point out several other very important contributions that we have in this picture, and I think that you'll agree that these are impressive numbers. What's not shown here are the efforts on our other campuses, which are also yielding substantial gains in need-based scholarships. We're currently working on short and long-term plans to grow these resources and to highlight their importance to Wisconsin citizens, policymakers, and potential donors. So that completes my report. We have system administration point people here to answer any questions you might have about specific action steps. But before I open it up for questions, I'd like to just mention again that the progress here is due to the hard work of many people across the system. The provosts and the chief business officers have taken the lead in many of these initiatives, and without their leadership, we would not have been able to move this agenda forward. And I also wanted to point out to you that none of this has required new state resources. We've reallocated resources where necessary. We have funding available from the system to support campus pilot programs in the coming year. Budget issues, working in our favor, of course. And we've also been able to attract substantial funding from outside foundations and from other higher education organizations. And finally, we've benefited enormously from your enthusiastic support, and we thank you for that.
Thank you, Rebecca. As you can see, there is just a tremendous amount of activity around all 11 of these action steps, and we haven't had time to tell you everything that's going on. We've told you some of what's going on. I want to take the opportunity to really thank Senior Vice President Martin, who has applied enormous amounts of her intelligence and time and energy to making sure that all of these steps move along over this past year. It's just been a terrific job, and all of those in academic affairs who are working with her and partnering with all of our colleagues at institutions across the system to make the kind of progress you just heard a little bit about this morning. And there's one other person I want to mention, her predecessor, Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs Emeritus, Don Mash, who was the architect, if anybody was, of the think tank process and the whole Advantage Wisconsin strategic plan that got us to the action steps and the progress we've made today. Don came back to hear about the progress. So, Don, where are you? I think he's over here. Thank you. Thank you for your work. So with that, Mr. President, I think we can open it up for questions, comments, reactions.
Okay, questions from members of the board? Regent Smith.
On the UW-Madison Connections program, do we actually have, I'm sure we have numbers, as how many people are participating in that with dual admission?
We had numbers that we presented in October, but that did not include, all of these campuses. With the UW Green Bay entered the program with this fall class, and while I think there were a number of people that were admitted into the UW Green Bay part of the program, I think at the end of the day, Madison ended up going into its wait list, so some of those people ended up on the Madison campus. I'm not sure whether any of them ended up at Green Bay, and I don't know if there's anybody here who knows that.
But the numbers are increasing.
But the numbers are increasing. We are expecting, with more choices in the mix for next year, that we will see that go up as well.
Regent Connolly-Kiesler, then Regent Crane, and Regent Barthel.
Just a question on the financial aid for the students, the Wisconsin Scholars and the Wisconsin Covenant. I mean, this is fabulous to have this kind of revenue coming in for students. Is this endowed? Is it therefore in the market? Therefore, will that be effective next year? Or just curious as to.
I'm assuming so. We don't have, I don't think, anybody from the Fund for Wisconsin Scholars here. Anybody? I don't know for sure the answer to that, but I'm assuming they're going to have some issues as well. They were intending to ramp up. How quickly they'll be able to ramp up with that 175 million base, I don't know, given what's going on in the market. Is it?
It is in stocks, and they are having difficult. And nonetheless, they're committed to spending what they said they're going to spend for this mission.
Good.
Okay,
Thanks,
so
Biddy.
we're good next year yet. It'll be the year after that if they decide to start readjusting numbers. Okay. Maybe we'll have a big recovery.
Maybe.
Regent Crane.
I'm glad that this report is given this morning in all its comprehensiveness, because we've heard bits and pieces of this in the Education Committee, for instance, and in front of the whole board. I'm wondering, I think we've done a good job of promoting the understanding of what the growth agenda is. But I'm wondering about the complexity of all of these various programs and understanding within the system what each of them is, and then how to communicate all of these things to the public. I have to keep reminding myself sometimes about which program is which and what its aims are, and it seems to me it's complex, and it's I guess my question are all of these things clearly understood within the system, what all of their aims are and who's involved, and secondly, how we communicate that beyond the system?
I can address that, and Rebecca, maybe you want to too. I think it's a very good point, Regent Crane. I'd go back to what Ernest Hemingway said about a good novel, that it's like an iceberg, only the tip is above the water. That's what the reader actually sees, but there's all this other stuff going on beneath the surface. And
that's why liberal education is so important.
Very good. And I think, if you remember the green and white growth agenda for Wisconsin 6-panel brochure that we distributed, I think at your last meeting, that's kind of the public face. I think you have to reduce it down to some extent, because there's a lot of stuff going on beneath the surface to get to those big goals. So talking publicly, I think we want to keep hammering at the goals with a little bit of how we're getting at them, but that's not the whole complex story. Internally, we have always communications issues. I think it varies tremendously what people understand, and a number of our colleagues, Lane Earns has mentioned this to me a couple of times. We really need to get a sort of connect the dots map of all of the programs and how they are aiming at those goals and how they connect to each other. So I think we are still working on that. Rebecca has actually developed a grid that we've looked at that tries to do that. It's not quite ready for prime time, but even that I think would be more ourselves and our colleagues internally with the sort of brochure-like message for the general public.
Well, actually, Kevin mentioned Connect the Dots. We have a group in academic affairs that's called Connect the Dots. And we've been meeting on a regular basis just to make sure that as we're working not only on this set of initiatives, but all those grant-funded programs that got mentioned along the way, that we all know what each other are doing and that we make sure that we are leveraging the synergy among these programs to move the agenda forward. I think that the one-page synopsis of the work in each one of these areas that we prepared for you today will stand us in good stead as being good communication tools to help campuses understand what the different pieces are, because different campuses are engaged in these initiatives at different levels as well. So, but we really need to figure out how to make it more accessible to the public. And what I'm imagining is that, you remember, part of the notion of how we got to this set of action steps was to try to identify things that people outside the academy would recognize as progress. It's not just about talking to ourselves. It's about things that people out there in the world will go, wow, they did that? And as we do these, we're going to be rolling out different pieces of them in the public arena. And I think that, there's some coming up in the near term where we will be doing just that as we have different pieces available, complete.
Okay. Regent Bartel?
I was one of the regents who urged that we take this up periodically, and I was frankly a little skeptical that we would, but I'm very pleased to hear the...
I take that as a direct hit.
The president, a compliment. This is a compliment.
Oh, thank you. I just didn't hear it that way.
I'm very pleased with not only the presentation here, but with the progress that has been made on most of these action items. I realize that it's early and there's a lot more to be done, and there are a lot of things in pilot project status right now, but I'm just very pleased with it. I had one question about something that you said, Rebecca, regarding the growth agenda item 4, which is the model inclusive excellence item. You said, I think I heard you say that we are lagging in transfer from 2-year to 4-year institutions, which if it were more successful, could improve the equity and inclusiveness objectives. Could you elaborate on that?
Sure. In some other states, a primary access point for students of color to the 4-year degree is a community college. In this state, we are not seeing the participation levels for students of color coming through that pipeline as transfers into our 4-year institutions. And we think we can do a better job with that. So we're now using an approach that's very much like the equity scorecard to try to analyze why that's happening, try to figure out what's going on, where are the barriers, why are we not seeing students coming through that pipeline.
Well, you're analyzing now. You haven't come to the strategies portion.
No, we haven't. We've just begun.
Okay. Regent Vasquez, then Regent Loftus, and Regent Davis, and then we'll go to the other side.
As a follow-up to the question, does that also include the discussion with the technical college system as opposed to just simply our own?
Oh, the technical college, this is a collaboration between the group, the research group at the University of Southern California, the UW system, and the Wisconsin Technical College system. Definitely. And we're also involving the College of the Menominee Nation in the conversation as well.
Regent Loftus?
On the Connections program, the Madison area technical college, I think it went to all of their district, just did a brochure advertising the price advantage that they have for the university program.
Right.
You said that the Connections program at the technical school is, in essence, you were admitted to the University of Wisconsin, and you said it was not a transfer program. Is there also a transfer program?
Yes, there is also a transfer program. A transfer the difference is that through, and Biddy, maybe you can help me with, or Larry can help me with this. As I understand it, the UW-Madison Connections program takes students who are academically qualified to enter Madison as a first-year student, but because of the large numbers of students in that category are not among those who are selected to begin as freshmen. They are then given the opportunity to start their work at Madison Area Technical College, one of our 2-year colleges, or one of our 4-year colleges. And they start there, where they are also admitted. Okay? So it's dual admissions. A transfer program is one where a student begins their coursework at any of those institutions and would then, if they, over the time that they're there, take the courses that they need to be able to transfer and do academically well enough to demonstrate that they could handle the work, they can then apply for transfer to Madison or to another of our 4-year programs and transfer.
So MAT, the Madison area, doesn't have a specific transfer program to UW-Madison?
Well, they don't have the transfer program that they have is their 2-year liberal arts degree. There also are, I don't know whether Madison has any articulation agreements related to other degrees, but many of our comprehensive institutions have articulation agreements with MATC and other technical college programs where there's an agreement that if you take these courses, they will all transfer in. But it's not something that begins with an agreement when you're a freshman. The transfer program is something that begins when you complete what you need to have to be able to transfer.
Last question then. Students of color, that transfer program in the technical system, is that included in your...
Yes, it is.
Regent Davis?
I have 2 clarifying questions, and I only wrote Carnegie and 3 campuses question mark. So I guess I want to know whatever that was you said about Carnegie funding and 3 campuses participating.
Right.
That's question 1. And then the second one, if you could elaborate on growth agenda action item number 2, which is the student engagement portfolio. If I could hear a little bit more about the student voice and input into the development of that agenda item.
Okay. Okay. In terms of the first question, the project that we're working on is called Give Students a Compass. And it's a project that is being sponsored by the AAC&U, the American Association of Colleges and Universities, with funding from the Carnegie Corporation, to look at remapping general education, to align it with LEAP, and to look at enhancing the student success for underserved students in those programs. So it has kind of a dual set of priorities. We identified 3 campuses that were already well along in working on that agenda to participate in the first stage of this grant, and those 3 campuses are UW-Eau Claire, I'm looking at Rebecca, UW-Eau Claire, UW-Oshkosh, and UW-Milwaukee. The second question is about the student engagement portfolio, and I'm going to ask Larry Rubin, our point person, to respond to that question.
As you recall, the student engagement portfolio was that initiative that attempted to add some supplemental material to the traditional transcript that would define what students were doing outside of the traditional classroom experience to add to their sort of portfolio to help them in terms of gaining employment and possibly enrollment in graduate school. And the way we're approaching that right now is we convened a system-wide committee with representatives from all the campuses to help us clearly define what that initiative is going to look like. And then, as you saw, what we plan to do next fall is to hold a system-wide event where we would bring representatives from other institutions, perhaps, that have good models of that, to have an opportunity for campuses that are interested to look at those various options and hopefully come away with the idea that this is something that they would like to do. We hope to be able to identify a couple of institutions that would really be interested in going forward with pilot projects and provide them with some startup funding to really help get started on that.
And when we do have that event, we are definitely going to be inviting our student leaders as well.
Okay, so they haven't really been involved yet?
Not yet.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Any questions of any Members of the board here. John?
Rebecca, you mentioned on item number 4 that there's been modest and inconsistent gains and achieving inclusive excellence. I guess my question is, what has been working and what hasn't been working, and will we be getting more of a full report? I know you mentioned that there would be something in March.
We are going to give the final report on Plan 2008, which ended 5 weeks ago, right, in March. And at that time, we will definitely be addressing that specific question.
Okay, Regent Falbo?
I made up a question because I want this side of the table to be better represented. One comment. It seems like this process has not only created new initiatives, but it has heightened the awareness and the effectiveness of existing initiatives. And I think it's just a double win. It's a great thing. But I have a question. I don't even know if it's an issue. And we're talking about the relationship between universities, Madison and other universities within the system. Do we have, and again, thinking of the goal of having more degree holders, is there a reverse initiative where students of Madison who may not adapt to the Madison experience, and do we have any initiative there so that we don't lose them from the system?
I don't know that.
Is it of any value? I don't know.
Well, I don't know that we have any formal initiative, but I believe that our provosts at the comprehensive campuses will be able to tell you what my experience was when I was at Parkside, was that we often got students who either started at Parkside and transferred to Madison and came back, or students mostly from our region who started at Madison and decided it wasn't a good fit and came to Parkside. I think it's a very common thing. It happens a lot. So I don't know that we have any formal process to promote that, but it is something that we are aware goes on.
Well, I mean, I don't know if the numbers are of any value, but something in that area that we could heighten the awareness of. We may get more students to continue on that might not otherwise, or to stay within the system that might not.
Right.
When we say a lot of people do it, I think we should bear in mind that the retention rate in Madison is high.
Well, and that would then suggest to me that if there are enough people that it's noticeable on our comprehensive campuses that are doing it, that we're not really losing them from our system. They're finding another place. So.
She was right behind you.
David, you want to use the mic so the folks can hear us? Yeah. You might want to give it to Chancellor Martin so she can reassert that on the microphone.
Yeah. You seem rather anxious. Maybe I should give this to you first, video.
I feel that I've had my say.
Maybe not dollar for holding this. We don't have a formal policy in the colleges, but we do see a lot of students who actually go away to the four-year campuses, and for a variety of reasons, if it doesn't work out, they come back and basically start with us. And so I think Sharon did a presentation to the board looking at transfers within the UW system, and there was a large percentage of the transfers actually coming from the 4 years back to the UW colleges. And so I wanted to make that point known as well.
And I'd just add, Chancellor Wilson, it's interesting what decisions our consumers make. There also are as many UW system students transferring into technical college system as there are technical college system students transferring into the UW system. So, we've got a much more sophisticated group of consumers out there than we had 10, 15 years ago.
And we have a word for that now in higher education. It's called student swirl.
Swirl. Anybody else on this side slighted by the fact that I called on Regent Connolly Kiesler first?
I would just make a comment, if I could.
Yeah, Regent King.
I really like the growth agenda, and so it's just a comment. Because of its comprehensiveness, it's from know how to go for younger students to adult populations, e-portfolios, and the connections program. So it has such a breadth to it. all excellent initiatives, so thank you for your hard work.
Anybody else? Regent Pruitt?
I was looking, Rebecca, at sort of 4 through 8, and they're all kind of pipeline. Seem like they're all, you could almost group them as kind of pipeline issues in terms of things that are designed to create. I was just curious, sort of the conversation and the thought, and both here and also on the individual campuses, in terms of sort of ongoing research and analysis of all these initiatives, in terms of what's working well, what's working a little less well, where could we sort of, in terms of recognizing difficult times, if we were to decide to prioritize certain things, invest additional resources in certain strategies as opposed to others. How are you thinking about that, and how are you sort of on an ongoing basis evaluating these kinds of individual initiatives?
Well, I think assessment clearly has to be part of the picture here. And as I mentioned to you that we've reallocated resources internally at the system level and we actually have a call for proposals out right now to the campuses to fund some projects for next year in a number of these areas, pilot projects. And a key component of the proposal is assessment, so that we, from the beginning, will be gathering the data to tell us what we're doing, what's working. I think many of these things are at early stages, so that we don't have a lot of evaluation information at this stage, but it's definitely part of what we will be looking at.
Could I just add to that, Regent Pruitt, two comments about access. One a big one, the other a specific example. And you used the pipeline metaphor. I'm talking about sort of the front end of the pipeline, getting students in. If we're to be successful, and the chancellors and I have begun to talk about this very seriously, I know the provosts have with Rebecca, if we're to be successful in doing the growth agenda in a state where we know our high school population numbers are declining, we're going to have to do a lot more, put a lot more time and attention on pre-college connections and work. That's clear in the global sense. A particular example of a place that I think the equity scorecard is turning up some things, or at least spotlighting some things we didn't know before in that area, has to do with applications. For instance, we've started to find that one of the things that's been a barrier to more students of color getting accepted into our campuses has been incomplete applications. The applications come in without certain elements that they need, and those students then can't be admitted just because the application doesn't get completed. How can we put more attention, resources to getting those applications completed in a way that lets those students be evaluated for entry into a campus in the system? There'll be, I think, a whole array of things like that fall under that access umbrella that we are going to have to pay more attention to in the future if we're going to be successful with this plan.
Rebecca, I have a question for you that maybe draws on your prior life as a provost. Let's say that you have this group on studying math competencies that you described. So that group finishes its work and comes up with an agreement on competencies. How does that get translated, though, to the campus admissions committee, the campus admissions criteria? Just sort of a nuts and bolts process question.
Well, I'm not sure that you ended that in a different place than I was going with it, because the important translation of that work is not to the campus admissions committee.
Do you want me to ask it a different way?
No. The most important translation of the work at the end of that will be to the high school curriculum. What we have now are admissions criteria that say you have to take these classes. And if you take these classes, you can enter in math, you can enter the university. What we're finding is that students take those classes in math, which we believe prepare them for university work. They get to our door, they take the placement exams, and they place into the remedial courses. So what's wrong? What's not working there? What they're learning in high school isn't what we think they should be learning in high school to come into college. So we're trying to build a better connection between what we believe students need and what's being taught in high school. One of the things that we learned through the American Diploma Project is that there isn't as clear an understanding as, I guess, as we thought there was on the part of high school teachers about what they need to be teaching to prepare students. So what we're trying to do is get people from all of the UW campuses, including the UW colleges, all of the technical colleges, and all of the private institutions in Wisconsin to come together and say, this is what you need if you're going to take entry-level math at our institution. Here's the minimum that you need. And to be clear enough about that in the way that that's articulated so that then we can work with the high schools to help them bring their curriculum to that level. This is a process that's going on in parallel with the final stage of the standards for the high school curriculum that are being developed by the PK-12 community as part of the American Diploma Project. So this is our piece. We can't raise the standards on the high school side unless we make sure that those new standards are well aligned with what we need at the post-secondary level.
Thank you. Any other questions? Regent Drew.
Yeah, I found it interesting what Regent Pruitt said about items 4 through 8. They're all really pipeline issues. And, you know, I think when we look at where we're at in terms of inclusive excellence, it's really unacceptable where we are. And I guess it's easy from the view on the 18th floor to say it's unacceptable because I know there's tremendous barriers and difficulties out there to doing it. But I think to the extent that we succeed and improve in this really is to the extent that we as a state are going to succeed, because I think we do a lot of comparisons with Minnesota and Wisconsin, but I think if you take Milwaukee out of the equation and take the Twin Cities out of the equation, we're fairly similar in terms of college degrees, incomes, things like that. So I think, you know, it really is imperative that we, especially with the economic times, it doesn't get any easier to improve that, but to the extent that we're going to be able to bring people of color into our institutions is really, to a large extent, going to be how our state succeeds in coming years.
Regent Drew, I think we would all agree with you that our progress is unacceptable.
Any other questions or comments from members of the board? Okay. We'd like to thank you very much. Appreciate all the work and your leadership in this area. So we'll may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
We'll stand adjourned and we'll take a lunch break, and then starting at 1 o'clock, the education, 12:30.